All right, well, it is 5:30. Thank you everyone again for joining us. My name is Amanda Wigner and I'm the Communications and Public Affairs Manager for Madison Metropolitan Sewerage District. I am going to turn it over right away to my colleague, Brandon Braithwaite, who is also on the call tonight, a project engineer to the district, and he is going to get us started off tonight. So Brandon, go ahead, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Amanda, and welcome everyone. Tom, go ahead and share your screen in presenter mode for the presentation. Thank you everyone for joining this evening. As Amanda said, my name is Brandon Braithwaite. I'm a project engineer with the Madison Metropolitan Sewage District. I am also joined by Tom Stetzer and John Solon from Strand Associates, our engineering consultant on this project, and Lisa Coleman, our Director of Engineering at the district. We are holding this public meeting today to share information about this project and to receive your feedback on our potential alternatives. First, some housekeeping items. All microphones have been muted until the Q&A session of the meeting. Please save your questions until that time, and Amanda will call on each individual if you use the raise hand icon on your screen. That icon will let her know you have a question. Otherwise, feel free to use the chat feature to type in your question during the presentation, and we will read out the question aloud to our presenters. This meeting is being recorded and will be posted on the project web page and our YouTube channel for the district. So let's get started.
Really quick, Brandon, I'm going to jump in. Tom, so I know you've got two screens going on, but the presentation got kind of small. Can you hit the from the beginning icon up in the left corner?
Double check something here. I think I got paused before we had started, so I'm gonna rebroadcast here. Is that better?
No, unfortunately, we're still seeing it kind of in the PowerPoint editor.
Let's see here.
That looks better.
Perfect.
I see it good.
Thanks
for getting that Thanks for getting that sorted out, Amanda.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now we can get started. And if you click to the next slide there, here's our meeting agenda. First, we'll provide some background information on how this project developed, present the alternatives that have been identified and review their considerations, discuss the project schedule, provide instructions how we can collect your feedback regarding this project, and of course the question and answer session. A little bit about the district. Madison Metropolitan Sewage District was created in 1930 by state statute to protect the environment and treat wastewater. The district now serves almost 400,000 people in the cities, towns, and villages in the greater Madison area. An underground network of pipes conveys wastewater from the village of Waunakee and the town of Westport to the Nine Springs wastewater treatment plant located in southeast Madison. Now I'll let Tom share more specific detail about the Waunakee extension system.
All right, so let's talk about the Northeast Interceptor Waunakee extension system. You can see here up on the screen, we have a map kind of in the more bold blue, green, and pink lines that show the existing interceptor system. So the existing Northeast Interceptor Waunakee extension system is located between the Yahara River on the south and the Village Center Pond in the village of Waunakee in the north. This interceptor transverses lands in the city of Madison, town of Westport, and the village of Waunakee. The Northeast Interceptor Waunakee extension is a combination of 10-inch to 30-inch concrete sewers that was constructed in 1971 and is approximately 26,000 feet long. The first most time-critical phase is phase 1 in the green area, and is approximately 9,000 feet long and is in need of additional capacity in the near future. Other phases are anticipated to reach capacity in 2030 in the blue area for phase 2, and by 2040 for phase 3 in the pink areas. It's anticipated that the needed additional capacity may be achieved through either a relief sewer, which is a new sewer constructed parallel to the existing sewer, or possibly with a replacement sewer to replace the existing sewer with a larger sewer, or possibly a combination of these two. All right, so let's talk capacity. So capacity needs drive the project. The map up on the screen right now is the same Interceptor map that's color-coded based on when the capacity is going to be reached in each of those segments, with kind of the priority being in the phase 1 area, which is the orange area, which by modeling is already at capacity. So as you all probably know, the Waunakee area is an area that continues to grow. So if we do nothing, we will exceed the current capacity of the Interceptor system in the near future, meaning it will not be big enough to carry wastewater flows to the plant. This would lead to potential sanitary sewer backups or overflows in the future. So to keep that from happening, we would need to add additional capacity by either replacing the existing sewer pipe with a larger pipe, like I mentioned earlier, or possibly a relief sewer, which would be a parallel sewer. All right, so moving on, what is an interceptor sewer? So interceptor sewers is a larger diameter sanitary sewer that conveys flows to the wastewater treatment plant. It's a gravity pipe that's installed sometimes underneath roadways, like shown here in the graphic on top, and other times in undeveloped or lower, more environmental areas. So the graphic here on the bottom shows, when from businesses and from homes, wastewater flows from your properties through laterals to local sewer pipes, flows downhill, sometimes to pumping stations, if it's needed to pump over hills. If not, it flows directly into an interceptor system, like I mentioned earlier, that takes those flows directly to the wastewater treatment plant. All right, so some more basics on interceptors. So how is an interceptor sewer installed? There's two primary ways to do that. The first one on top here is through an open trench method. So that would be used with an excavator method in areas that we have space to dig an open trench to install that sewer. The other option, so areas where maybe we have a busy highway or a railroad to go underneath, in those areas we would likely use trenchless techniques, where we would bore and jack a new pipe underneath the existing feature, whether it's a roadway or the railroad, to get that pipe installed without shutting down service to those areas. All right, so alternatives analysis. So as I mentioned previously, additional capacity is needed in the existing system. So we've, as a design team, we've been taking a look at many different options for pipe replacement versus pipe relief. Starting out here in the kind of the South Star by the Yahara River, all the way up to the North Star, which is up into the heart of Waunakee. And so what goes in, what types of things are considered when we look at these things that go into an alternatives analysis? All right, so lots of different considerations that we must look at when selecting a route. So the word cloud here on the screen represents a high level of all the different considerations we as a design team are currently thinking about. Those shown in black above are more on the technical side and pertain to construction and operation. Those in blue are considerations that are most tangible, possibly to the community. And please keep in mind, these are just some of the overall considerations that we must weigh, and we'll welcome any comments later on as part of the presentation related to any of these. So alternatives analysis process, this is just kind of a small snippet of an example alternatives analysis matrix. The one we have for this project is quite a bit more elaborate, a lot more rows and columns, I guess, for each of the phases, but just kind of gives you a snapshot of some of the things that we weigh and kind of color code throughout our analysis, whether it's depth of sewer, if there's rock out there, coordination with the railroad, communities, any conflicts out there, like utility conflicts, and also looking for opportunities and sustainable opportunities to partner with communities along the way. So in the end, this is the tool that kind of helps us guide through our decision-making process. So the next slide, I'm going to transition over to John. He's going to kind of walk through kind of the alternatives analysis that we've completed so far, looking at some potential routes for this interceptor sewer by starting with phase 1.
All right, thanks, Tom. So phase 1 is kind of slated to be that mid-2020s construction. So coming up here, you can see in the exhibit here that phase 1 basically starts at point A, which is the Cherokee Marsh Yahara Heights County Park area, and it would extend to a sanitary manhole that's existing today behind the Savannah Village subdivision. Out of all 3 phases, phase 1 has the most alternatives that we generated. For discussion purposes, we broke phase 1 into 3 segments just to guide us through discussing. It doesn't mean it's going to be 3 phases of construction. So next slide. So that kind of segment 1 from point A to B. Again, A is just an existing sanitary manhole that's in that county park. And 2B, which is the intersection of State Highway 113 and West River Road. We're going to look at that on this slide. The black line that you see by that point A on the map there, on the exhibit there, is the current route of the existing interceptor. And that area is actually phase 3, which I'll talk about in a couple slides from now. So diving into our routes, well, I guess before we dive into it, I just wanted to briefly expand on what Tom had said earlier about difference between replacement and a relief. I'll use those words kind of interchangeably when I'm talking about alternatives. So a replacement option is taking that existing pipe today offline after a larger pipe is installed. A relief is when you actually are going to keep the existing sewer pipe in service post-construction and relieve some of that additional flow that's anticipated with another pipe that could be right next to it or a different route. So that's the difference between a replacement and a relief option. So getting into the alternatives, phase 1 alternative 1, which is the darker blue line here, it is a replacement alignment. So actually underneath that dark blue line is the black line. That's where the existing interceptor approximately runs today. So from point A, it would cross over to kind of that 113 County Highway M intersection. As it travels north up 113, that's a very challenging corridor. It's very tight between the edge of 113 and the improvements and the private property improvements that have been made with some of those businesses there. There's also an existing pipe in the ground there, the existing interceptor, obviously. And then there are also a number of private utilities like gas mains, electric lines, and force mains. So it is a very tight corridor. As we were evaluating that, we think it's going to be very tough to get an existing pipe and the proposed pipe in at the same time. So we would think that option may require a bypass pumping, as basically you're taking out the existing pipe and putting the new pipe in a similar location. And that's challenging. Bypass pumping is expensive, a little risky because you're using pumps to obviously bypass the flow. So that's a shortcoming of that route. Another shortcoming of that alternative is the work zone itself for the contractor to get in with his crews on 113 is really limited. And there may be a need to have some shoulder closures on 113 for them to physically get in there and do the construction. So that route is challenging, which prompted us to look at 3 different alternatives, which are all relief options. The first of which would be phase 1 alternative 2, which is that green line. So again, we'd still be, heading from point A at about the same location until we got to 113, but we would keep on the east side of 113 instead of crossing 113 in that location. Now the east side of 113, as it heads north to River Road, has more room. There's not an existing interceptor pipe in the ground there today. and there's less private utilities. There's actually very few private utilities that we know of in that location. So that route would allow, less impact. Hopefully, the contractor would have a larger work zone, and they would not have to, may not have to use any type of shoulder closures on 113. The challenge with that route is there is kind of some standing water areas. There's some ponding areas and some wetland areas, and there may be a lot of dewatering with that route, which may be challenging. So another alternative would be phase 1 alternative 3, which is again a relief alternative. So that route looks a little funky with the bends, but it actually follows the parcel line, the property line for the county park. To the left of that is actually DOT property for 113 and Catfish Court. So that route pulls the relief away from 113. So we're giving the contractor a lot more room to work, and hopefully not impacting 113 to the same degree. That route also is generally drier. So your kind of wetlands and dewatering concerns are lowered with that route. The challenge with the purple route and that kind of light blue route would be you do have to cross Catfish Court, and Catfish Court is a dead end, and there are businesses obviously south of that crossing. So you start getting into traffic control concerns and staging and potentially widen and temporary pavement to get vehicle traffic south of that crossing. So for the purple route, we really prioritized, minimizing the amount of time that pipe is running along and through Catfish Court. So that route actually shows a utilization of a permanent easement kind of on the north side of one of those businesses there, and gets that pipe back over to 113 before it gets to the West River Road intersection. The last route alternative would be phase 1 alternative 4. That's that light blue route. I think it's called Cyan 2, but I always want to say Cyan, so I'm going to call it light blue so I don't mess up. So it looks a little funky. There's a big gap there between the purple and that light blue color. Actually, that space in the past, and you can kind of see Tom's highlighting with his cursor, that was actually a spoil pit or a spoil site for dredging material from when the Cherokee Marsh area was dredged in the 90s, which isn't really conducive for any type of pipe support if we put pipe through there for that material under the pipe. And we're also told that the county really doesn't want any type of infrastructure going through that area. So that's why that light blue route is kicked way out. Again, it's just getting even further separation from Catfish Court. 113 gives the contractor a lot of room to mobilize and do the work that they need to. That route is a little deeper. That would be a downside to that route as it gets up, heading towards River Road. There is a hill there, so that corner where it turns west starts to get pretty deep with the excavation. And then in this route, we do show the sewer going up Catfish Court if an easement isn't utilized, and that may require, again, some widening of pavements, potentially some relocation of private utilities out there in order to get the new pipe in and to keep traffic moving south down to the end of Catfish Court. Move on to the next slide. So this would be, I guess, kind of your stage 2. Again, B is the intersection of West River Road and 113, and C is the current crossing of the existing Interceptor with Kennedy Drive. Before I dive into these, I do want to let everybody know that these are kind of interchangeable, these alternatives between stage 1, 2, and 3 of this phase. By that I mean, if we the purple route in the first stage ends up being kind of the most desired route, that doesn't mean it has to follow the alignment of the purple route through this stage. If we gave all the different options, it would start to get really, really lengthy. So they can be interchanged, and that purple route from the first stage could follow the green route from the stage. I just wanted to let everybody know that. So as with stage one, that dark blue line follows the existing interceptor. Again, it would be a replacement. West River Road is really challenging location, and we looked at that in pretty good detail. So it is a dead end, and there's a number of commercial businesses and obviously the ready mix plant that are served by that road. And that existing interceptor, it does run, you know, down the road. It's not off to the side. So a replacement option, you know, we would be looking at running something down the road again, but that would require traffic control and potential staging, like that Catfish Court crossing. And the other challenge with here is if you want to try to move off the road, there's wetlands to the south, there's wetlands to the north, and there's actually some ATC lines, some bigger power poles on the north side of West River Road that have some setbacks on how close you could bury a pipe next to them. So you're kind of funneled in and locked into having to deal with some pretty challenging traffic controls with that route, with that replacement route. If you'll see by the W on West River Road there, that blue line kind of jumps up and over, and that again does follow the existing interceptor route. It's not maybe the most ideal location if that parcel, that farm field were to ever develop, which prompted us to generate that purple line, which is phase one alternative 3. And that basically is a replacement option that keeps on that West River Road alignment or property line, follows the railroad property line with a setback, and then gets up to point C. So the purple route is essentially the same as the dark blue route, but it does straighten out that kink. And again, those are both sewer replacement options. The other two alternatives, which is phase one alternative 2, which is the green, and then phase one alternative 4, the light blue, would be relief options. They would continue to follow up that east side of 113 as they move to the Kennedy Drive intersection. That east side of 113 from B to that intersection are still really open. There's really no private utilities in that location. The west side from point B to the Kennedy Drive crossing on 113 does have a lot of utilities, which is why we didn't show any interceptor alternatives running up that way. There's also room there for the contractor to get in and not impact 113, and hopefully no shoulder closures. And there's limited wetlands, but it's not to the same degree as the wetlands that would be encountered on that West River Road route. I think the big challenge with that phase one alternative 2 and that phase one alternative 4 route is when we get kind of to the middle of Kennedy Drive up there. There is a hill if you're familiar with that route, and the excavation does get pretty deep. And deeper excavation usually means wider holes to get down to get there and bench down. So there is a possibility that those routes might require Kennedy Drive to be closed through that middle section through a period of construction of the interceptor. And we'll move on to the last kind of part of phase one. And that would be from point C, which we just left off at the interceptor crossing of Kennedy Drive, to that manhole that I mentioned was behind the subdivision there. I guess this isn't quite as creative as the other two. There's basically everything's converging, all 3 alternatives onto the existing interceptor route. So where that railroad text is, kind of to the southwest there, that's a pretty large hill if you're not familiar with this area. And if we were to shift the proposed interceptor kind of closer to the railroad track, you'd be getting into some really deep excavations through that area. And then the opposite side, that space between all those colored lines and 113 on the kind of the northeast side of that exhibit has a lot of kind of wetlands, low-lying areas, and some wooded areas. So again, not the most ideal spot to construct a deep pipe. So that's kind of why everything is following the existing route, and we'd be looking at kind of a replacement of the existing sewer through this section. Okay, so we'll move on to the next slide, and this is phase 2. So this would be what Tom mentioned, that 2030s construction time frame based off the capacity needs. So we start off in the kind of the bottom right corner of this exhibit is that manhole that we left off with on phase 1, and then it extends all the way along that 6 Mile Creek corridor to the South Division Street crossing where the existing Interceptor crosses today. So, when we looked at this route, we looked for a lot of different alternatives like we did for phase 1. Kind of the defining characteristic of this route is that creek valley. The pipe's probably as shallow as it can be through this area, and there's not a lot of development. When we looked at deviating from that route to see if we could utilize any local streets, any route through the streets through the kind of the industrial area to the west and to the north, we just really started to get to deep pipes again. And like I mentioned earlier, the deeper those pipes go, the wider the excavation gets. If you're running it down local roadways, you're really blowing out the majority of that pavement. You might have to have some street closures. You would likely have to have some private and public utility relocations. So as we were looking and exploring different alternatives through this area, we kept coming back at the fact that we feel that the existing route is in a pretty optimal spot for phase 2. Therefore, what we're presenting and what we're proposing would be looking at just doing a replacement of the pipe through here with a larger pipe. Then we would move on to phase 3. So phase 3 is that kind of 2040s time frame that Tom had mentioned, and phase 3 is broken into 2 different segments. One's at the furthest south of the Interceptor, and you can see in this exhibit where that red line starts is that manhole that basically started or ended phase 1 near that dog park area, and it extends through kind of the junction of the Northeast Interceptor serving Waunakee and Westport with an Interceptor serving the forest and then crossing Cherokee Marsh to the pump station there. This area also has some challenging terrain. Obviously to the south is the Yahar River and Cherokee Marsh, and as you head north of that red line, it's a pretty steep grade change when you're getting up to River Road, and any pipe going north would get deeper and deeper the excavation for that. So kind of like phase 2, we got funneled in with our alternatives, looking at kind of trying to thread the needle between too shallow, too deep, and making sure that that pipe is accessible in the future post-construction. So you will see in this route, the red line does deviate from the black line in the first half of kind of that red line. What that's showing is we do think there is merit in pushing that pipe a little further north and having a little bit deeper construction and deeper structures, just so that after construction, the district has an easier time accessing and getting to those manholes. Because right now, a lot of them are pretty close to the edge of Cherokee Marsh. Next slide, we're going to look at the complete other side. So this is the furthest northwest of the Interceptor, where those brown and green lines start. That's where we left off with phase 2. We're across Division Street. So the existing Interceptor is that black line near the brown line there. I'm sorry, it's kind of small, but this is just a littler section. So that area developed a lot since the 1970s, and a lot of the commercial buildings and everything they have in their yard kind of built up around it. So those structures are actually kind of hard to get to and sometimes covered and a little difficult. So we did want to at least pull that a little bit away. So that's why you see that brown line is pulled away from the black line a little bit. And that is basically mirroring the edge of the property line through that area. That would be a replacement, and with the hope that those manholes and structures can kind of be tucked away at the edge of the property and a little easier to find and have access to in the future. The green route, I guess, is a relief. So if that brown line is just difficult to construct, there is a lot of there's buildings there. There is a lot of stuff in the yard. Like Tom said, this is a capacity project, so that existing pipe isn't in bad shape. It's just going to be running out of room in the near future, or in 2040 in this case. So that green route could be another a route to at least relieve some of the flow coming to the Interceptor. And that one was being proposed kind of north up South Division Street, and then along one of the accesses, driveways to those buildings. And that's kind of the look at this part of phase 3. So with that, I'll go to the last slide, kind of a summary slide. Obviously, I talked a lot about phase 1. Phase 1 has a lot of options for consideration, and we're trying to kind of find the best route, combinations of routes to as we work to design on that phase. Phase 2, again, as we look through the topographic constraints, the development around that area, we feel that the existing pipes in a really optimal location would be presenting a replacement through that section. And then phase 3, again, have some constraints with topography and some of the businesses around that pipe, but we do feel that there is some potential to at least make those structures more accessible with our alternatives that we're presenting. With that, I will hand it back to Tom to continue the presentation.
Yeah, thanks, John, for the summary and kind of walking us through the routes there. So next step. So what's next for us on the design team? So first and foremost is to compile all the feedback that we've received. Not only, previously we've had meetings with municipalities along the route and some property owners, et cetera, but also look to feedback from anyone on the video tonight, and would encourage anyone to give us your input, and we'll kind of consider all of those things that you bring forward, along with the rest of the technical implications that we find along the way. So our kind of in the short term here, our goal is to select a route so that we can start getting into more detailed design. So by selecting a route here in the near future, that way we can jumpstart some of our field investigations related to the selected route, and then again jump into that detailed design phase so we can get some true design work done to prove some of our kind of concepts. And then again, I mentioned the stakeholder feedback, and this is critical. As a design team, we can investigate and survey and look into things and do our research, but sometimes the best information comes from the property owners and the municipalities. Maybe some things that we just don't see while we're out there, and people that have lived there for many years can kind of point us to things for us to consider. So we appreciate any feedback we do get. So I mentioned those field investigations. So what are they? So first off, topo survey. You may have actually seen our surveyors out there within the last week, just kind of getting set up and ready, setting some control points and benchmarks while we kind of sort out the rest of our alternatives analysis and things like that. So that'll be one of the first things we do here. Hopefully the weather holds. It's been good for surveying here, so I'm hoping for brown and green grass here moving into February. Next up, we'll have a tree survey. So we do have a certified arborist on our team that will go in and log and survey all trees along the selected route so that we can verify the tree species, diameter, and health condition of all those trees to make decisions related to their future. Archaeological and historical studies, so we'll be doing that to see if there's any hits on any art historical areas out there along the route. Soil borings, we'll want to get our geotech sub out there to do soil borings to check on the soil conditions, but we'll of course do a wetland delineation to try to minimize any wetland impacts along the route for construction, and then any utility line openings. So these are just going out to pothole to find exact locations of those utilities along the way to try to prevent conflicts during construction. All right, so schedule. So everyone's probably wondering when all this might be occurring. John had mentioned, and I had mentioned earlier that phase 2 and 3 are out quite a ways. We're looking at like 2030 and 2040 respectively for those phases. So for the current phase, kind of on the south end there, that's kind of what we're focused on in the short term here for detailed design. So you look back in kind of the second half of 2022, what we were working on, looking at this research and alternatives analysis. That brings us up to the first star here tonight, which is our first public involvement meeting. Shortly after this meeting, by early February or so, we're hoping to select an alternative, to get into, that field investigations and detailed design work, which we anticipate the design work happening kind of throughout, the calendar year 2023. We'd like to circle back to another public meeting while we're in the design phase, just to let everyone know kind of where we landed on our final design selection, based on everyone's input and also the evaluations that we did, kind of with the end game goal here of having this project bid out this next winter, which would allow construction to start then in 2024 at some point. And again, coordination along the way with all the municipalities, with Westport, Waunakee, the Madison residents, businesses, property owners, to keep everyone informed and also keep receiving input. Wanted to mention that there is an active project webpage that was listed. If you received one of the postcards from the invitation for the PIM, there's a link on there to the project website, and can be seen at the bottom of the screen here. I'll also have it listed on the next slide as well. But again, provide information. This presentation is being recorded, so I believe there should be a link posted for that in the near future. And then Brandon's going to talk about a feedback form here in a little bit as well. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Brandon to kind of wrap up the formal part of the presentation.
All right. Thank you, Tom, and thank you, John. As noted, the district has provided a project website with a link in it to supply your written feedback about each segment of this project that John had talked about, A to B, B to C, and C to D. You can also submit feedback about this project to our email addresses that are shown here. And I just want to stress that your feedback is greatly appreciated. This project cannot be a success without your feedback. So just wanted to thank you in advance for being willing to provide that feedback to us. Thank you for attending this presentation. And I believe we're ready to proceed into the question and answer portion of the meeting. Amanda.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brandon. So for those on the call, I just wanted to draw your attention to the chat. I have posted both a link to the feedback form as well as to the project page for this project. And I see that link is not quite working, so I'll repost it here in a moment. But if you have questions, you can either raise your hand here in Zoom, and you can do that by clicking the reactions icon down on the bottom of your screen. It's probably on the bottom of your screen. It just depends on how you're accessing the meeting today. And then just click raise hand, or you are more than welcome to submit a comment into the chat. That chat just comes to me, and then I will ask our presenters here to answer that question. So I'll go ahead and leave a few minutes here. Well, as much time as we need, but just give you some time if you'd like to raise your hand or put something into the chat. And I did just post a clickable link into the chat to go to our project page. The first one I had posted was not clickable. So you can click directly on that and go to the project page, learn more about the project. You can also sign up for updates, and the feedback form has been linked there. Just one other note for individuals on the call: if you are calling in, I know we had a couple people who called in today. You have a question. It is *6 to unmute yourself so you can ask your question. So just leave it open here for a moment or two if you have questions. Otherwise, you can also, as Brandon mentioned, reach out to Brandon or Tom, and their contact information is here on the screen.
Amanda, I'm not sure if you can see any of the current chat comments, but I think I saw one question come through from Tom K.
Oh. I must not be able to see the chat comments.
Okay.
So Tom,
maybe you gave me too much control here on the presentation, but I can kind of flip through here from the top if that's okay with you, Amanda.
Yeah, please do. Thank you for catching that. I am not seeing anything.
Sure. And let's see here. So from Tom K, how was the decision made between a parallel line and a single larger line made? So great question, Tom. I think quite a bit goes into that decision. I would say generally speaking, if we come to the conclusion that the existing Interceptor route that's out there today is in kind of the optimal location, kind of like in that area C to D, like we had mentioned earlier, that John had talked about. In those types of situations, we're probably not going to put another second pipe essentially right next to the old one, just because it's duplicate pipes for the district to maintain long term. So in those types of situations, where we feel that's kind of the optimal route or maybe the only route to go. In those cases, we would probably replace with a new pipe, whether it's in the exact same location or maybe just slightly offset for installation ease to keep the old pipe up and running during installation, probably one of those two options. Now, if there's areas where we feel relief installation, a second parallel line that's in a different, kind of geographic location is advantageous. Those types of situations might be from either maybe there's a new service area that could benefit to connect to that new Interceptor pipe that would have a hard time reaching the existing pipe network. Or maybe it's just a constructability related, if it's just a really challenging to get in to put a new pipe in the same spot as the old one, just due to everything that's happened since the 70s when that pipe was installed the first time. And so those are kind of the main two things that I can think of right now. But many times that's a big driver, is if we can find a good spot for it in open space, but also maybe pick up some additional future service areas that might be coming into play for the district in the future.
If I could make a follow-up question, does that mean double manholes as well?
Related to if it's a replacement.
If you've got a side-by-side line, do you end up with manholes side by side as well?
Well, if we did do the side-by-side, that would probably be a replacement. So after the new pipe was installed and tested and then put into service as the larger pipe, then the old pipe then would be taken out of service and abandoned. So then you would just end up with the one pipe network and one system of manholes.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that. Yeah, like what Tom said, and what I was trying to, I guess, say with that first, that first phase one, I guess, stage one. In most scenarios when we're doing a single replacement, you try to offset it a certain amount of distance that you're comfortable with based off the size of the pipe, the depth of the pipe, the soils around the pipe. Install that new pipe, keep the old pipe in service, and then when everything's tested, transferred over, like Tom said, you take the old pipe offline, and then you're left with, in a post-construction scenario, one pipe, one larger pipe, one set of manholes. The problem with this one that was a little different, I hope I didn't confuse anybody, that blue line is just so narrow, there's not really room that we can see of building it parallel without building it almost on top of. And obviously in that scenario, you can't convey the existing flow anymore. And that's why bypassing in that scenario may be likely, but that's unique, and just that it's so constrained there that your replacement might have to occupy near the exact same place as your existing pipe.
Yeah, and John, I can maybe add to, like, for example, this segment between C and D, like we talked about, John explained that we kind of landed that, the pipe there today is in what we feel is kind of an optimal location. Through here, this is probably going to be a replacement section, which again, I think ideally we'd lay a new pipe kind of close by, very close by, but very, parallel to the existing, put that in service, and then take the old pipe and manholes out of service and abandon those. I think I have another question here from Russell. Is phase 1 expected to be completed in 2024, or is it expected to also go into 2025? Probably somewhat to be determined. I think we have to put a little bit more thought into just the construction timeline, and that is likely going to be based on, which of these alternatives and these different segments kind of happen, because some may take just a little bit longer maybe than the others, or maybe have time restrictions based on things like a river road, shutdown temporarily, and things like that based on the ready mix plant use. So just throwing out ideas, but the goal is to get construction up and running in 24. I guess we'd have to circle back, after we do a little bit more kind of constructability takeoffs in regards to if we think they could get it all done in one construction season or not. Another question here from David K. How wide is the easement currently? I believe through between Kennedy Drive, between C and D here, I believe it's a 30-foot wide easement. Most of the older MMSD existing easements, David, are 30-foot wide, centered on the pipe, so 15-foot each direction. I believe that's what's out there today, but I'd have to confirm. Looks like another question here from Russell. Does phase 1 work start at the south end at point A in the presentation and work its way north to point D in the presentation? Good question. More often than not, these gravity sewers, Russell, are laid from downstream to upstream. And so A is the downstream point where the existing flow travels to the east and southeast across the Yahara River, actually. So almost in every situation with a gravity pipe, yes, they would start here down somewhere near A and then work their way upstream through B, through C, and then through D. Once in a while, if there's a situation where there's maybe a time constraint on, maybe a contractor can only get through a certain area during certain months, whether it's wetland related or maybe a roadway crossing for shutdowns. There are times when they do have to jump around a little bit. It's not ideal, but I've seen projects where maybe they have to do part of, C to D, again, to avoid, some type of timeline issue that's out there, and then maybe jump back and then continue working on, the other segment. So it just kind of depends. But generally speaking, best case scenario, yes, A all the way to D. Let's see, another question here. If you replace the existing, do you replace the original pipes and manholes? Okay, I think we answered that question a little bit earlier, David, that you expressed verbally. So yes, those would get abandoned if it's a replacement. If it's a relief, the old stuff's going to stay in place in those sections. And then do you remove the existing? I guess it's a little bit case by case on if we remove the old infrastructure. I guess standard protocol, kind of where we would start the discussion, would be, the old pipes. If we're not installing the new stuff right exactly where the old one is, say it is just offset a little bit. The typical way of doing that is we would abandon those in place, likely fill them with concrete slurry, and then all of the existing manholes that currently stick up above the ground would be removed to below grade, and then also filled with concrete slurry to an appropriate depth below grade. Now, if there are areas where we have to replace in the exact same location as the existing pipe, then yes, the old stuff would get removed as we go. But like John mentioned, that requires a lot of bypass pumping, which is a little bit riskier, but also quite a bit of added cost too. Let me just double check, Amanda. I think that might be all of the questions that came through. I see your link for the feedback form.
Yep, and And through the magic of Zoom, no questions have come to me. So somehow you got the full power, Tom.
I'll gladly give it back when we're done.
Okay.
I think that is all the questions that came through the chat bar.
Excellent. So we'll just do a last call here. Again, you can throw them in the chat and Tom will see them. Or if you want, you can raise your hand and I do see those. So just give another minute here in case anyone else still has any questions. Otherwise, again, you have the links here. Would love it if you could provide some feedback on the different portions of the project. And then we have contact information for both Brandon at the district as well as Tom at Strand, which is helping us with this project. So, Tom, you have anything?
I don't think so. I don't think so, madam.
All right, well, going once, going twice. Again, thank you everyone for joining us today. We will get a recording of this presentation up and on the website tomorrow so you can review it or share with anyone who wanted to be here but couldn't. And again, thank you so much for being here and have a great rest of your Tuesday night.
Thank you.
Thank you.